It's the darkest night you can imagine.
Hey, space boy, you broke my rocket man heart. Where are the stars? Is it bright or is it dark? The vacuum of space, oh, the tomfoolery.
What happens if you get a leak on there? You have a leak.
Deep over my bubble.
It's hard to comprehend.
Space is fake AF.
Two little bitty O-rings.
Space is fake AF.
It's not what you think, homeboy.
Space is fake AF.
It's all just start doing this.
Space is fake AF.
Research Eddie Bravo.
Okay, we are live, 6/5/2024, Infinite Plane Radio. That is Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms. Space is fake AF. Phones are open, 563-999-3664. I just turned on all platforms. We have the 24/7 stream on, and what I do is I just plug in and take over. So I have a few comments I want to go through on the YouTube channel, and we'll start with this one from Influence Freedom. He said John Hinckley Sr. ran World Vision, which is a known CIA Christian ministry front. Let's see, he was due to have dinner with Neil Bush the day after Reagan was shot. Okay, and just for background, we've been talking about John Hinckley and how he was inspired by Taxi Driver, which has Robert De Niro. So he was inspired by Robert De Niro, who's like an assassin in the movie. And then De Niro makes his recent world stage appearance at the Trump trial. And we mentioned how he was in Joker and he gets shot on TV. And Joker is based on Taxi Driver. See how this Joker, Taxi Driver, De Niro connection we've been getting into? And Taxi Driver inspired the shooter of Reagan, John Hinckley, who, again, side note, but it's relevant here, has the same birthday as JFK. But here's the thing, his dad, John Hinckley Sr., ran World Vision, a CIA Christian ministry front, and he was supposed to have dinner with Neil Bush the day after Reagan was shot. So Bush was having Reagan shot so he would get into power, that's the theory. And of course this is from Influence Freedom, who says, quote, Bush was also involved in JFK's death, in the opinion of many, but based on many facts. Bush is a former CIA director, but he couldn't get in as president right off as people just weren't into him, so he got on Reagan's ticket. Also, Mark David Chapman also worked for World Vision. Now, is Chapman the one who shot John Lennon? And he had a copy of Salinger's book, Catcher in the Rye? Because that's intriguing in itself, because Catcher in the Rye and Taxi Driver here are both these motivators for assassins. Kind of intriguing here. It goes on, coming back now to Jodie Foster, I always suspected she was CIA, and hence why she helped with the bogus narrative that Hinckley was trying to impress her. Jodie Foster is also in Taxi Driver. Now this is interesting, because yes, Jodie Foster was in Taxi Driver, and there were love letters sent to her by Hinckley. Erotomania. He believed that they were in love with, that she was in love with him. You know how a lot of MAGAs have erotomania for JFK Jr. So there's that, and it's interesting that she later shows up in Silence of the Lambs and has this serial killer weirdly fixated on her. That relationship. But anyway, here, the connection is interesting because it's the Bush connection. And to slightly expand on this, on the 6th of July, 2022, the 42-year-old Georgia Guidestones were destroyed. And this is on George W. Bush's 76th birthday. So 7-6, 76th birthday, 42-year-old statue monument gets destroyed. All kinds of 42s, all kinds of references to the Skull and Bone Society, which we could get into, but the main one I think worth noting here is it may tie into this notion of the Bushes being assassins, regarding JFK and possibly the Reagan one as well, because the Skull and Bone Society's logo is the crossbones with the head above it, and the Georgia Guidestones from above have these four pillars and then a capstone, which creates something of a skull and crossbones. And if you look at the way it was bombed that night, it would be commensurate with like a headshot. And this was 2 days before Abe, Shinzo Abe, or Abe Shinzo, former Japanese PM, friend of Trump, was, shot. So we were just talking about at this time how prevalent the theme of Trump being assassinated was. And then this Skull and Bone Society affiliated monument gets damaged in a very specific way. Just kind of, someone says more volume. Let me see if anyone else has that issue, because oftentimes we get these trolls who pretend like there's a volume issue here, but I'll see what the commenters say. Elephant Tusk says, I imagine all these psyops are making normies go insane, but all of IPS is just sitting back. Yeah, look, if you're reaching for ammunition and not popcorn, then they have you. They control your mind. Like, they're not going to take your guns. They already control your minds. Travis Cloud says it's normal. Ollie Goering says good. Yeah, I don't trust newbies who've never been here before, who say that the volume is low. It's an old trick. Like, oh, you're buffering. That's another one. I used to use these tricks back when I was a troll in a past life. Okay, let's just get back on track. Phones are open if anyone wants to call in, and hopefully it's just not another irate chemtrail hover. Chemtrails make people mad. It really does. Maybe they should drink some fluoridated water and chill out a little bit. They get really irate and triggered. And again, if you're triggered, it's because you're mind controlled. It's not because you're awake. Like, look at me, I'm awake. I'm so triggered. If you're not triggered, you're not paying attention. It's like, no, if you're triggered and paranoid, it's because you're programmed. The mark of someone who has achieved inner peace, who recognizes it for what it is their calmness. If anything, we're jaded, not paranoid here. Okay, let's move on. President Trump now has 11 times as many felony charges as Al Capone. What a time to be alive, from End Wokeness. A lot of his followers take pride in this. They really do. They think he has street cred. They think this is somehow boosting him his reputation. Now he's cooler or something. However you look at it, it's all just a show, as most of us here have been talking about. He's in his Biff Tannen stage. But this association with the Mafia Don is intentional. We've been discussing this as well. The character Trump has gone through several permutations, and he's in his Biff Tannen Mafia Don, soon to be Antichrist stage. All right, let's see who's in the chats here, just to get a heads up. All right, Woods Bear. Nice, we have a bear in the chat. Diana South, ears up. Elephant Tusks, already mentioned. Osher. Jungle Jim. Cosmic Pie, hopefully you can hear us. The HBIC. Okay, excellent. Elephant Tusk says Dr. Phil's doing a 2-hour interview tomorrow with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Cool. Is he going to talk to him about his narcissism? I'd be really interested to hear this interview. Okay, let's get on track here. I had a lot of things earmarked in my minds.com. On the 2nd was the 7th birthday of our channel, or Hatch Day, of the channel mascot, the Emperor Penguin, Fepe Akbar. 7 years that we've been consolidating around certain ideas, represented by the penguin, weirdly. Or maybe not when you really get into what the penguin represents. Like, and if you take darkness as a symbol of ignorance, ice and harsh climates as a symbol of secrecy, banned areas, and then you look at the penguin as this perennial outsider, If the world is flat, if Antarctica is a ring, well, then who would have that perspective? Who's at the quote edge of the world, if there is one, or if there isn't? Either way, it would be them. They are also the deepest diving birds, and so the deep dive into the sea of irrelevance, in which the masses are submersed, and we don't get lost in it because we maintain a raft. The penguins raft up on the water and they float as a single unit. And so that's kind of been a consistent theme with us, the idea of the raft, as they pump more and more disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and just delusional nonsense into the cyberspace, into our shared commons. It's really insane. I mean, it's by definition, our world is diagnosable. Okay, let's see. Going through comments, joined by we. Oh yeah, by the way, phones are open if you have anything to call in on. Yesterday, someone had asked me to define mind aids. Lacking a mental immune system against mind viruses. Leaving the believer open to all forms of mal and misinformation. The result of a lack of skepticism. The general public is programmed and indoctrinated to accept an argument from authority. Like people have always been programmed when they're in cults. Accept the authority of this book, Dianetics, Book of Mormon, Bible, Quran, whatever your holy book is. And the argument just comes down to argument from God, argument from a divine source, unimpeachable, you must believe. And the argument from Big Brother is the one that governs this religion, the dominant world religion today, the argument from the screen. And if you accept that argument, then your mind is open to anything that it wants to download into you. If you don't have a mental immune system, if you're susceptible to any mind virus, then the best description for your condition, of course, is your mental space is compromised. So, maids. And this is by design. They don't want people to be able to process information and to know correct from incorrect or fake from real. They want you to need them to tell you. So it's like once you've discerned real from fake for yourself, you no longer accept their argument. You're no longer programmable. They take you out of their closed system. It's kind of interesting. It's like Garden of Eden. You're not supposed to know the difference between good and evil. If you have any discernment, you're not exactly uh, their target anymore. You're not programmable. And I think that's kind of the idea here. Sort of like the Village. I often talk about the movie The Village. Perfectly encapsulates this whole scenario. Like once you've understood here that people are programmed to accept this as an authority, it all makes sense because when you take that away and you include additional information, then you recognize it's a closed system. It's a model of reality, a false one at that. I mean, it overlaps in so many ways that people don't recognize it as a model. And let me point this out. This is great here. This is a great example of how things work because people often think that's too big to fake. How could they fake something so big? Somebody would have been hurt, 9/11, too many people involved. Check this out. This just happened. In preparation for Euro 2024, a hospital received victims from a simulated terror attack. This is in Berlin. 900 injured in simulated attack. So they just did a simulation for 900 people needing medical care, a mass casualty event. In preparation for Euro 2024, a hospital received numerous victims from a simulated terror attack, 900 injured. So they come out showing gunshots, wounds, burns from explosions, and they're all actors. Major crisis scenario. It says here 900 injured, 120 falling into the red category, life threatening injuries. These simulated attacks are part of a regular anti terror and disaster control preparation. Now, this is intriguing here because what we're looking at is the scale question being answered. How many people can they involve in a psyop? Can you get 1,000 people involved in a flash mob news event, for example? And it's kind of eye-opening. 900 is a pretty high number. And you wouldn't need that many, but just think about the number of people involved in any of these events. These aren't closed sets with just a small group hoaxing the news. That's why I don't really care for the term hoax. it suggests an isolated incident, like a Jussie Smollett. No, this is more like a propaganda event that integrates with the rest of the media ecosystem in a way that is essentially it's almost like a department of media. It's just like their hyperstition department. We need to insert this condition into the worldview, and this is how they do it: propaganda. But it's not just the stage itself. You got to think about the law enforcement involved, the fire department involved, the politicians involved. We had a conversation about 9/11 the other day, and someone's like, "Well, I don't believe anyone died, but maybe some first responders." It's like, no, they would be front lines, part of the operation itself to fake the thing. All right, catching up on comments. Elephant Tusk says people should focus more on the internal as opposed to the external, looking for answers. Um, Possibly, but I don't think so, because I think we live in such an immersive illusion that you can't actually arrive at a proper perspective until you've diagnosed it, until you've stepped outside of it. You have to go outside the Truman Show. Imagine if Truman spent all his time meditating, and if he never got in the boat and ripped a hole in the edge or whatever he did, if he didn't walk off the set, he wouldn't have seen the set as such. And what I'm positing here by introducing skepticism towards media writ large, conceiving it as a monolith, is a separation from the world model itself and recognizing it as a model. That's the trick. You know, they have people's face pressed up against the screen, the mainstream media view. And the conspiracy theorists, their head is all the way through it. Their frame of reference is even deeper into the immersive illusion. But you have to socially distance yourself from the screen. And a literalist says, can't fool millions of super smart people across the plane. Well, you know, intelligence has nothing to do with it. I think the smartest people in the world are also dupable. It's actually one of the words here. And what prevents people from seeing this and therefore becoming unduped is their own big egos. Dupable, the capacity to be tricked, deceived, or made into a dupe. And we are all dupable. For example, if you're at a magic show and you stay in your seat, you're going to be tricked if they're good. And so that's generally the case. You won't know how they achieved it. But you're informed enough to know it's a trick. You don't go in there thinking they're doing real magic. Yet, when people watch the news, they're fooled all the time because they sit in their seats and they look at the illusion from the perspective that the illusionist presents it to them from, and they're automatically assuming it to be exactly as it appears. That's a major philosophical crisis. That's again by design. Maids. Joined by Michelle Kastner. Thank you for joining. We have about, let me get the numbers here, because if you didn't know, we were doing the 24/7 live stream. I do replays of recent streams and relevant archives are drawn out. And so we have 82 over on Twitch. We have about 45 now on the main YouTube channel, and about 30 or 40 on Odyssey, and I think just as many on the audio only feeds. Total I have here right now is 129. And if you want to get in on the chats, just go to ips.monster, and most of those links will have a chat room. Or you can call in at 563-999-3664, and you can listen while you're on queue if you don't get through immediately. Now, Elephant Tusks suggests here, he says, I believe it all to be dreamlike experience influenced by my own consciousness. Like, I find this to be an interesting conversation, however. I think it's safe to say that belief doesn't create reality, that the mass belief doesn't directly correlate with the result that we get. Otherwise, moon landings would be real. You can fool billions of people. You can put billions of people into a false model. But can you change the objective model itself? And the answer is obviously no. Now, outcomes can be influenced by choices and decisions, sure, but the physical laws of nature aren't manipulated in the way that that it would suggest, like a dream, for example. Like there is a usefulness to looking at it. I mean, the models that people use today is like simulation. which is just a way of describing what people used to say is they'd use the language of dreams. And there's some usefulness to it, but my focus here is making a distinction between objective reality and the world as observably true and exist as we experience it versus the televised model. And the televised model has certain augmentations, and it's not just the mainstream version, but it's the spin offs, it's the subsets, it's the conspiratorial view, it's the woke view, it's the view from the various paranoid factions that have their own spin. And these are all just perspectives. And I'm like, this is interesting how we have this big box of acceptable ideas, which I call MSM, and all these competing belief systems within, but none of them, not a single one of these belief systems, takes into account within its perspectives the fakeability of what is presented on the screens from official sources. And if you don't account for that, then you're blinkered and you're essentially within an alternate reality game. I often cite the tagline from the movie War Games, which is strange game, the only winning move is not to play. And I think that's true. If you're playing this game, not only are you losing, but you're also made into a liar. And I don't think there's any truth in it. And not only that, but there's this assumed moral high ground of the agitated activist. Like, I'm mad because I'm paying attention. You're apathetic. You have a lower moral high ground. You're not waking up the sheep or doing your duty. This type of shaming of the auto hoaxers or of the sleeping normies. But I'm like, no, we skeptics have the moral high ground here and the intellectual high ground. And those who are deep in the weeds, who are triggered and trying to spread more information around, yeah, you're actually propaganda mules spreading bites of fear for people to, just that's all it really comes down to. You're enhancing the illusion on behalf of the power elite, and it's certainly not the position of anti-war. In fact, it's engaging in info-war. And I think that the info-war is the primary place where there is any war. And so if you're taking sides in it, you're actually part of it. You're part of the infrastructure. That's why I've also been suggesting that the real position we should take as skeptics is anti-anti. Like, it's good to be anti-pro, whatever, not necessarily in a knee-jerk fashion, but like to be informed about something and to reject it. But you can't just take the de facto anti position, the reflexive anti, because that's where controlled opposition lies. Jim H said, somebody told me I'm going to hell because it said nobody died at Sand Hoax. What do you think about that? So you don't believe the news, you go to hell? That's a new one. I've heard that used for like Bibles and holy books. Like, if you don't believe what's in this book, you're going to burn forever. It's like, hey, you don't believe what CNN reported, you're going to hell. That's fascinating. That's all I can say. It's fascinating. Because the truth of it is, the Sandy Hookers are going to hell. All those liars are going to hell. Ironically, Robbie Parker is going to burn next to Alex Jones, if that's his real name, with all those fake dead kids. If they exist and they go along with it, they're going to be in hell burning as well by those rules. Personally, I don't believe in hell. And hell is a scare tactic, and heaven is just a false promise, future faking, a manipulation tactic. Space is also, in the same way, a place where they can project all kinds of utopian visions, things we'll never achieve. It's all a trick. Okay, let's see here. Sandy, look, the thing is, I don't even care about that one event because there's a forest of fakery. All these trees are fake. And here we are, IPS, clear cutting this forest of fakery, hard at work. And we have truthers who are running in circles, chasing red herrings around big trees. And the media focuses on these to the exclusion of the entire forest that we are just leveling. My point of it is that whole event, same with 9/11, you can talk about these things ad nauseum, but you have to remember that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And not only that, but all fake events above and below, fake space and on the ground, take place within the same fictional universe. Fictional universe is like Marvel universe. If you're going to write for Marvel, you're writing in a fictional universe in which these things exist. These certain capabilities occur with some people. Like you have certain dynamics introduced, and if you can obey those constraints, you can create fiction for that fictional universe. Like you could write a Middle Earth tale. You just have to have sufficient background in it. It's like role-playing games operate on this. If you've ever experienced role-playing games or any video games that have spin-offs or movies with spin-offs, it's all about having this fictional universe that all the creators agree upon these rules. And all the fake shootings exist within a fictional universe. And this fictional universe of fake events is superimposed onto reality. And it's the only thing they focus on. So I'm not in denial of murders and shootings and deaths. In fact, someone across the street from me just got murdered. And I'm like, okay, like the street gets blocked down, police and everything, but you're not going to hear about that. The names haven't been released. No crisis actors, no agenda, no press conferences with politicians talking about grabbing guns. It's not talked about because it's real. The real stuff doesn't get the attention. And that's because the news media is, um, it's interesting how it's like liars are. Good liars don't lie with every breath because then they would be bad liars. You wouldn't trust them. Good liars lie strategically. They just blend it in with the general truth that they tell, generally reflecting the truth. And that's how media operates. They have all kinds of useful idiots doing real reporting and journalism, and then you have the special groups that are connected to the mind war operation. Okay, catching up on comments. Jim H says there are crisis. Look, the thing is, too, I wouldn't even focus too heavily on the actors. I'm more interested in the directors. And not only that, but the scripts themselves. Like I'm not anti-government. I also want to say this. There's a bifurcation in every major position, in every psyop. It's always split down the middle. And so the left is pro-government, the right is anti-government. And I think it's important to take the position of anti-anti. You don't want to get lumped in with the QAnon shamans with the spears, or the MAGAs chopping people's heads off, or the conspiracy theorists setting themselves on fire. The Infinite Plane Society is more of a philosophical ivory tower organization, and we have to take that position because there will be agitators who say, you're not legitimate because you don't want to go after the government. It's like, or you're a bootlicker because you're not anti-cop and you have a driver's license. And, really that's not where we're at here. And if the worst case scenario is true, you're better off becoming informed instead of just becoming triggered, which is just what tends to happen. Okay, let's see here. Elephant Tusk says, question about your experience of synchronicities. Isn't that proof your consciousness is influencing your physical reality? Not in the sense of changing it. It's like, for example, everybody in the world believes that we went to the moon. Does it mean moon landings are real? Or something else? A sufficient number of people believe in dinosaurs. Does mass belief influence anything? And that's not really how it works necessarily, in my opinion. And when we talk about synchronicity, you also have to include intention, and of course, because it's not just right place, right time, but it also implies a connection between what one is thinking at that time, one's intentions. But is it proof I'm influencing it? No. If anything, it just suggests that maybe the results I achieve or the places I end up are indeed, I think, influenceable, sure. But I wouldn't say I'm influencing the physical reality in the sense that you're saying. Like I'm not bending the rules. It's uncanny timing, right place, right time, within the realm of possibility. So nothing impossible is happening. It's stuff within the realm of possibility, as improbable as it may be. For example, I couldn't possibly have arrived at this particular situation intentionally. Like when you get into synchronicity, I guess what we're saying here is like I'm not saying it's magical thinking, or even law of attraction necessarily, or something that you could even quantify. But it does have to do with being aware, of course, aware of the significance of things. And then, of course, I think part of it has to do with choice. Actually, it all revolves around choice. But what I don't want to do, because there are so many people who just, it seems like their sole desire is to say nothing is real and everything's fake and reality's a dream. And it's like, if that's where you're at, good for you. Get me some of whatever you're taking, maybe. I mean, because it sounds like LSD. It sounds to me like nihilism. Then it's like, well, nothing matters. Like if I believed in the Mandela effect, I wouldn't care about the news. I'd be like, hey, this is too cool. We're shifting realities. Why would I care about the nightly news and what people think? Because it could change tomorrow. No, I'm actually an objectivist, and I intend to stand on that. And if you're a pure subjectivist, I'm wondering, what is your attraction to auto hoaxing? If you're a pure subjectivist, your whole thing should just be transcending even deeper, not trying to fine tune a distinction between what people believe to be real and fake. It's just an interesting position because I think what I'd also add to it is that it's also a form of gaslighting to just tell people point blank with no evidence everything you think is fake or everything you experience is a dream and not real. Like that's not really a fair statement in my opinion. It's tantamount to gaslighting. The religions have always used gaslighting to get people to believe bullshit, to make them malleable, to control them, to take them away from an objective position. Subjectivity is a position of weakness, a position of ignorance compared to the people who are manipulating it. So anyway, I am interested in it, but I'd prefer you call in because sometimes I wonder if people really believe what they type. And I think if they have to get on record on the phone, they'd be less likely to say something they don't really believe. And I'm interested to hear if you really believe that everything is uh, just a pure byproduct of your thinking or your thoughts. Okay, we have a couple of phone callers here on queue. Let me go ahead and answer. I guess I'm anti-mysticism in that sense, if it's not rooted in some kind of objective understanding of this place. Infinite plane reality, infinite plane radio. Hey, caller. I
Yeah, is
yeah.
it me?
Yes. Okay. Yes. This would be you. You are first. What topic are you calling in on, if anything?
Oh, all right. So, cool answering person with a British accent. That was pretty good. Very classy. All
Oh,
right. So here,
really?
the whole belief thing.
Yeah. I didn't know.
Um,
I didn't know that there was
but
a voice that
yeah.
answers.
Okay. So, we're talking about belief systems and cause and effect with reality, right? Because
Yes.
I think we've had some pretty extensive discussions about the one of the underlying reasons that people are being led en masse into certain beliefs was because it actually helps to steer our reality and creates it on a certain level. Now, do you not believe that? Because I was under the
That's yeah.
impression that
That's
that was
mark.
your
That's the theory
point.
behind propaganda, marketing, persuasion. In fact, there's an entire catalog of techniques for manipulating people in groups, and religions have been doing it since time immemorial. I'm just saying that what the sheeple can be convinced to believe has no bearing on the world. We don't live in the world that Scientologists think exists, with Zeno the alien from the volcano. And there's a number of other examples where a lot of people are convinced of BS. Doesn't make the BS real.
Okay, that's confusing, Tim, because um, people when people have certain belief systems, literally, I just lost it, dude. I had a little smoke. That's
Well,
not
like
good.
for so what I hear, I'd ask you this:
Sorry.
which religion, which religion or belief system has somehow created some counterpart in the real world that validates its existence? Like religions
I don't.
are look. This is just this is like I think it's just true. Religions are evidence free. That's just a general principle.
Yeah, it's supposed to be faith, right?
Yes, yes, because they don't
Faith,
have
faith.
evidence. Because they don't have
Yeah.
evidence, they rely on faith, which is why it's a belief and not something that is known. And my issue here all along has been I'm at war with faith. We're in the age of information. We shouldn't be relying on our best um, sources who we just trust on faith. I think we need to be a little more proactive about getting down to what we know. And I'm separating from believers because we're in a world of believers with various belief systems that are all based in this subjectivist worldview. And so, no, I have no use for belief systems at this time.
It does. Yeah, it does. And it creates those people's realities. And with the law of attraction, those types of people will tend to group together. But of course, that is the majority at this time. You know that. But and part of what you want to do is change the tides.
Well,
And maybe,
in a sense, yes, but not like I don't want to wake the sleepers. I don't want to de-trigger the
no, I
woke
know.
or the wokesters. In fact, I have no white knight tendency in me. What I'm trying to do here is simply create a platform for those who've already figured it out. So we don't have to uh, play dumb and
Yes.
placate a lot of people who are just simply brainwashed beyond repair. That's their chosen religion. But there needs to be a place for this, and atheism doesn't cut it because they've adopted the God constructs of scientism. Objectivism doesn't cut it because
Okay,
they
so you're
filter through.
attracting a certain group.
Yes,
You're attracting a certain group that has a certain belief system.
no,
Really.
not a belief system, an operating system. You see, it's not about what we believe, it's
Okay.
about how we perceive. And we perceive the world in addition to the mediated view with full knowledge of what is deliberately excluded. So we're aware of the unknowns that most people don't calculate. And if you don't calculate
Okay.
for these things, then your starting point is wrong and subjective.
Okay, so you've got perceivers then. That's good.
Seekers,
So
perceivers versus
and what
believers, yes.
elephant tusk yeah, yeah. So what elephant tusk and I were talking about in the chat was the perception of the true nature of reality and how it's really working. Now I don't know if that's a level that's too far up from what you're talking about and the kinds of things that you're involved in. It would seem to me like that would be the natural course for that stuff, but maybe that's too much of a leap. I don't know.
I guess maybe the issue I have with this is that nobody has provided that yet. And the best explanation for a total explanation is being like for the best big picture we've been given is the dominant paradigm model I call scientism, nascitology. But if you don't accept that,
Well,
what's your next thing?
Well, I don't know. The way that I see my personal experience is it's a personal experience, and every person has to experience it in order to be able to perceive reality that way. And it takes just a little bit of time to get yourself quiet. And like you're saying, get out of the belief system of the group, the norm, quote unquote. Because and I think we all agree. I think people know they're being lied to on a certain level. They have to. Um, so it's just a matter of when they're ready to see it, to open the eyes.
One of my
But I know, and you're saying you're creating a platform for people that are already there at that point.
yeah, for sure. Well, for people who have at least arrived at a certain vantage point. They may not have all the answers, or they may not have followed their questions through to the fullest conclusions and arrived at where we've arrived at. However, if you're capable of stepping outside the screen, looking at a bunch of people on TV crying because of a massacre, and if you're able to say, I don't think that's true, I need more information. If you're detached from the traumas that they're showing you, if you're not emotionally drawn into it, then that's the place you need to be considered off-world stage. If they can't get to you, and so that's kind of what I'm recruiting here. I'm not interested in people who feel like they have to run for the hills or wave a flag or throw bombs in the culture war because it's the current thing. This is really kind of almost transcendent in a sense. I mean, inner peace as an alternative to obligatory mind war. I think it's an attractive proposition, but most people won't go for it. I want to find the people who are already there, who aren't taking sides in the pro-anti control dialectics.
Excellent. I'm glad you brought up the inner peace because that is definitely necessary. And yeah, so starting from this point of all uh, all mass media is basically propaganda, and you need to you know look at it with a discerning eye, and even just pretty much, I don't know, man. It's just like I don't believe any of it.
Yeah, that's a good
So
premise. What I say is this:
uh,
your media is not a window to the world, but it's a filter. But it's so clear, people mistake it for a window. And so that's what I mean. If you assume it's objective and it's a clear view and it's just informing you, then it will conform you. And that level of
Yeah,
awareness.
yeah, a lot of what you do is to show people that that's what's going on with the media. So yeah, so that's like kind of you're looking at the bottom peg that needs to be put in order for people to move in a certain direction.
And we have to also separate from those who haven't moved this far along, because we could be in a room full of people and we can all be saying, hey, look, this is fake, that looks fake. And they'll say, oh, I know somebody who went there and somebody died. And now you're trampling on their memories. And I'm like, no, those are rubber dead kids. And so we have to break away from the people who are still believers because they think of media as scattered groups of organizations with different agendas, when no, actually, at the level we're looking at this, at the events we're pointing at, it's monolithic at the level it operates. And so we have to also get to people who have already seen that this is monolithic.
All right, I'm just going to say, just because this is my personal viewpoint and this is how I feel, and maybe I'm triggered, but the blatant way that you talk about, even just the two words together, dead children, is just like, dude, I mean, all right, in my opinion, it could be done more tactfully and just as effective and maybe even more so.
Fake dead kids' lives don't matter. And if somebody's going to defend the sanctity of fake
I,
dead kids'
I know,
lives,
dude, but it's still just, I don't know,
now if you could
has
just
this
turn,
sort of,
if you could turn that disgust towards the media, then we could get somewhere with this. Because I'm merely pointing out atrocity propaganda and describing it accurately, and you're like, wow, your description of what they're starting to be real, that is actually terrorizing people, is a little unsettling. And it's like, no, fake dead kids' lives don't matter.
well,
You have to be irreverent.
there, there's a million ways to describe things accurately, Tim.
But not,
And you are extremely eloquent and you have a massive vocabulary, which I'm very impressed by, right? So just saying.
well,
I
I
just wanted
appreciate
to
it,
say
but
it. That's my opinion. Like I said.
there are various vectors that can carry a meme, and its triggerability is one. If you can offend 50 million people by phrasing it this way, then you should. And so when I say fake dead kids' lives don't matter, and someone wants to rush up to defend it, it's like, yeah, it triggers them, and it's like it should, because you're apathetic.
I think it actually has the opposite effect. It would seem to have the opposite effect, make people even more dedicated to protecting the children
The fake
and the
dead, yes,
nurses,
to hugging the propaganda, to
all of that shit.
advocating for media, and I want that. We need that. We need that polarization, because what we're doing here, and this is right out of Alinsky, you have to create the polarization. So we have to define the parallel media as distinct. And in
Oh,
order for it to be distinctly defined,
okay.
we have to challenge the dominant paradigm, because they're wrong. They have the moral and intellectual low ground. They terrorize children, the elderly, the general population. They are the terrorists and the source of all of the various mind war divisions, including, bigotries, racism, hatred, and all that. So it's like, my hands are clean. My conscience is clean here. And I'm going to use words as ammunition
They.
in
You
the
don't
sense
need to
that,
know them. Yeah.
yeah, and look, it's good. If people can be triggered, that's kind of like the attention economy's whole purpose is. You got to figure out what people's buttons are. And this is why I think the monolithic media wants to censor so everyone, is that they don't want other people to have access to their sheeple's minds to be able to throw in a meme and trigger them. They want to have a monopoly on their MK Ultra triggerables, because it is mind control.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever. I don't know. I think if they could have got that, they would have had it by now. Don't you?
They do have it. 2020 proved it, 9/11 proved it, every day proved it. The fact that people think we're
Well,
going to space proves it. We have been, as a species,
they do, but we're
conquered.
still having this. We're still having this discussion live,
I'm the only, if I wasn't here, who would
which
be
is
having this
fucking
discussion?
amazing. Really?
This is a very marginal, small group of people. No, the multitudes have been conquered mentally and spiritually. That there's no question about it. There's no resistance, and any resistance is futile because it's a closed system.
Oh no! I was like, don't say that. No. You know where that's from, right?
Where is it
It's
from?
from the Borg on Star Trek. Resistance is futile. It's like a famous thing.
It's true though. Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. The instant you become part of the resistance, now you're a liar. You're telling the counter lies to the
I
mainstream
agree.
lies. And so, no,
I agree, but
resistance
dude,
is
what does
futile.
that involve? what does not playing involve? So you're just talking about as far as the media goes, right? Or are you talking about lifestyle, about like the whole thing?
It would include a lot because the thing is,
That,
the nature of this
yeah.
system, I believe, is like a big brother. If you could pathologize him, he is a raging narcissist. And that structure,
Right on.
the power structure, the dynamics, like the Kafkaesque nature of it all trickles down into the individual, into your personal relationships. And so I just think that what we're doing here by detaching from being triggerable, from engaging in skepticism in general, is just a good practice. Because again, if somebody can just say something and trigger you, if someone can cry and get you to respond, well, then they control you, crocodile tears. And that's what, the whole crisis acting thing is really about that. Getting to the people who could be triggered emotionally. But we can't all be hit like that. See, I'm not hit like that. I laugh at those people. I mean, not that I'm being cruel, but it's a terrible performance art piece, and we're critics. And our ridicule of it is something they want to ban. I'm like, that's interesting. But anyway, my point is, I'm not moved by any of it. I haven't been triggered by a news story since I can't even recall. Okay, here we go. Christchurch was the last one I entertained. It might be real for about 30 minutes.
Um, yeah, that's you. And and some people can do that. I think it's good to keep in mind and maybe to even to just say once in a while, because I know every once in a while you'll be, people are like, I've got nothing to do. I don't have anything to do with the media at all. Unless it pops up somewhere and I see it inadvertently. But that's just because I'm easily triggered by, I'm an empath, and I'm easily triggered by things that have to do with any kind of suffering at all. So, and so I think you and I are kind of on opposite sides of that scale in a way. And there's, everybody's in between. And so it's good for people to know their limits as to far as, because if you can't watch something without being, think that it's real and you can't let go of it, in my opinion, it's better off not to watch it. And it's better off for me to have peace of mind, I have to eliminate all of it from my life, because unless there's something positive, which it isn't. None of it is.
That's
So,
interesting as a
I'm just saying
a
everybody's
lot of
different,
people feel
you
this
know?
way. They put warning labels. They're like, warning. For example, the 1,000 hoax shooting at the Borderline Bar and Grill. Wolf Blitzer's like, warning, graphic footage, turn away if you're at all offended by people being blown to bits by machine guns. So everybody turns their back on the screen because who wants to look at that? So everybody turns away. Well, I continue looking and I see nothing on the screen, quite literally. And I notice this is one of their tactics. If they tell you, hey, this is going to be terrible, you might not want to look, you might want to leave the room for a minute. If they tell you that, most sensible people don't want to look at grotesque stuff. And what happens then is now they believe
I
it.
don't know. I think the majority looked at it. Don't you think most people watch it?
No, a lot of people don't want to look, or they look at the censored version. For example, the guy burning
Okay.
himself. And what that
Okay.
does is it deprives them of the ability to analyze the evidence. So this is what I mean. They become believers by default. They trust them. They've been tricked by their own, by being hyped up about how
Yeah.
horrific it is.
Yeah. Those are the people that are better off not watching it at all.
Well, look, if I didn't look at
I
10/7,
know.
like if I didn't look very closely at 10/7 and what followed, I might have fallen under some kind of a spell. But knowing what I know and having worked in the death care profession, I was able to immediately spot discrepancies with all these uh, bodies lined up like sardines. I'm like, okay, this is completely wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And if I was like squeamish, I would not be able to do this job.
Yeah, right on, man. Yep.
And that tells you one other thing too, that because there have been numerous studies on how people who consume a lot of news about the atrocities actually get PTSD. So it tells you too that the media is the terrorist. These events are all fake, but people can be given PTSD. And the fact that it's traumatizing for people is why I call it MK Ultra, which is about trauma-induced mind control.
See, that's excellent. That's like mass mind control, mass MK Ultra on a giant scale. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
And we know it works in mass because they can push a button and everybody obeys. And this is why I talk about predictive programming so much. I'm convinced that decades of zombie movies was all to generate paranoia about the unvaxxed and to get into quarantine. Because all those movies are
Oh,
ultimately about quarantine. That's the whole purpose. Quarantine, quarantine, quarantine.
see that you go too far on a certain level, dude. There's always been zombies. There's always been zombie stories. I mean, you can't say it's all just for that,
Well, no,
really.
I'm saying the ways that zombies been popularized since George Romero and Richard Matheson, I Am Legend. I Am Legend was actually a vampire bat virus. But from the very inception, George Romero's movies, 1968, Dawn of the Dead on forward, the whole premise, or
68.
yeah, that one was 68. But the premise of these modern zombie movies, 28 Days Later, has always been about the virus and about man tampering with nature or something. But the end result is you have to get into quarantine. You have to lock down. You have to make decisions about who you let in. Have they caught it? Are they carriers? That was a big theme in 28 Days Later because it took that long to show. So you didn't know if you were a super spreader. So in other words, it has been this reoccurring theme in a lot of movies that, to program us to acclimate us to the idea of ubiquitous quarantine. And I'm just saying, I think that this is all done as part of building us up to something like 2020, so we all just move lockstep with the agenda.
So the more recent zombie movies, would you say within the last 10 years or the last five?
Well, at least
The
the
ones
last
that kind of are doing
it
that
even
kind of stuff.
it even go much further back, like Strain. It'd be a bit further back but when it took a decidedly, world zombie occupation, must get into quarantine angle, but the whole genre, kind of like climate fiction. There's entire genres that are just dedicated to advancing big agendas. And yeah, I would argue that the whole zombie genre was utilized for this particular purpose. And with 28 Days Later, the director of that gave us Civil War. And 28 Days Later was about a rage virus. Ironically, the apes caught it by staring at news clips of human doing human violence. So a rage virus. What is that? It's a mind virus. And that's foreshadowing what we're looking at now.
Oh, wow. What year was that?
Uh,
When was that?
the movie 28 Days Later. Let me take a look here.
Well, the ones the monkeys watching TV.
Yeah, that's 28 Days Later, and then Civil War just came out, and at the end of that one they killed Trump. 28 Days Later, 2002. 2002. It might be
Oh,
worth a rewatch.
okay.
It probably has stuff in there foreshadowing that we may not have even picked. I haven't watched it recently, but I was noting recently this movie because of who
Well, it's
directed it.
not only yeah, it's not only the 28-day thing, but it's the things learning aggression from things they're watching on TV.
Yes, which is ironic because they don't know it's
And
fake.
that's something that's ongoing,
The apes were all auto believers. But the
Yes, exactly.
but the theme here though is the mind virus because we've evolved. What they have done is they have used the physical virus as a pretext to acclimate us, to create train us, to get us used to the idea, and then they transferred that using politics to the mind virus concept associated with the anti-vax right. There's this great movie series on Netflix called Hot Skulls about mind viruses, and people have to wear earplugs or they catch it. And the people who are talking without
Oh
earplugs,
yeah.
they're called jabberers because they're always jabbing. And I'm like, kind of sounds like a anti-vax kind of slur, jabbers. But you see my point here. The mind virus was something that
Oh.
the public was trained to accept. It doesn't exist, but now it does.
Yeah, I could see, and that's a very good example. That is like the perfect example to use for people. That makes it very clear and plain about what the mass media is doing, and Hollywood, all of that. So just media in general, can we say? I don't know.
Yeah, with rare exception. It's amazing to me how science fiction is always reinforcing the same general themes. It's just cliche. Anything you start on Netflix, start any science fiction series, and it always begins this preamble. In the future, after climate change wrecks the world, in a post-apocalyptic, post-nuke Holocaust world, this is where we begin. So every futuristic sci-fi movie begins with the premise that we screwed up right now, that we're already headed on a crash course like with some kind of disaster because we're not changing fast enough, we're not progressive enough. So they all contain that premise, and that's always by design as well. They introduce that.
Yeah, I think that's well, yeah, all right. So I guess that's been a general fear for the population for a long time, but also, cultivated obviously by the media.
I mean, I do look out for good science fiction that has some kind of idea that we've improved things into the future, and it's rare. It's rare to
There's a
find
few.
something. It is. There are a
They're
few, but
very rare. I know you're right.
and I'm a fan of science fiction, even though
I think
I think it's
context
funny.
of it.
Like space.
What?
Well, I mean, I find like the space thing. Like I watch a lot of space science fiction, and what I find just the conundrums or the flaws, and I think this is by design too. With all these various outer space dramas on Netflix, they're always walking in their spaceships. They always have gravity on their spaceships, and like, why don't they just float around? Like with all these space movies, you think you'd have more people just kind of floating around. And I have a theory that this is part of the big mind control operation. They can't have people in movies floating around making NASA look dumb because NASA's floating around is really kind of terrible.
Could be. It's possible.
I think so. I think, look, because I mean, ultimately, I don't think there's a meaningful separation between the movie business, big movies, of course, worldview shipping movies, and the news and the space program, which I would contend the space program is a movie for all intents and purposes. It's a reality TV show. It's a psychological operation in progress, designed and intended, and I think it successfully has done this to merge the human race into a dream world, into a movie set, into an alternate reality game. And they got us with the big picture. Everything else is almost inconsequential.
Well, I don't know. NASA, you would think with their massive budget, they could afford better special effects.
Yeah,
Not sure what's up with that.
I often wonder that myself. And my best explanation is since they're dealing with top secret, classified stuff that's just way above what the general people of NASA would know, that they only have a small pool of people they can draw from, and that they're not drawing from
I
the
think
best.
so.
Like,
Yeah.
so I think that's why Hollywood is so much better. You know, there's a movie coming out with Scarlett Johansson called Fly Me to the Moon, and it's about how NASA needs this big
Yeah.
PR win, so they fake the moon landing. They're introducing this concept to the public.
Nice. Yes. You see, she's outing them. See, Hollywood does do some good things. I haven't seen it yet, but
I don't think so,
I'm going
because
to just go there.
what I'm saying is that this has been a concept from the beginning of moon landing denialism. That, yeah, they faked the moon landing to trick the Russians, a big PR win. But the problem with that is it's what I call a guardrail. It doesn't go far enough. It says space is still real. We still have satellites, but we just didn't do the moon landing. Instead of the whole thing is phony and fake. So I'm just saying here that
Well,
this explanation also conceals the fact that all of the nations are colluding in deception. They all faked the moon landing.
it's baby steps, Tim. Baby steps. See, this movie is a bridge to you.
Well,
It's not the actual
it's damage
plot.
control.
It's
No, it's
just
damage
helping
control.
people get
It's
there.
it's damage control, if anything. And I have a higher opinion of people.
But it plants the seed of unbelief.
I'm not a seed
It
planter.
plants the
I don't
seed,
believe in the
don't you
Socratic
think?
method. I don't think so. I think you got to go for total
Yeah,
paradigm
but no, it's
shock.
not you. It's this movie. We're talking about this movie now, not you.
No, this movie would be, if anything, damage control
However,
for NASA. Damage control.
by saying that they faked it.
Yeah. By saying we faked the moon landing to trick the Russians to win the PR victory, to win the mines. So
Oh,
that's their explanation.
oh.
And what I'm saying is
So they had a
that's not
legitimate excuse.
but that's not good enough because that doesn't include the fact that all of the governments of the world are lying to all of the people in the world and that space is a construct that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah, that
exist.
that would have been better. Yes, that would have been better. Yeah, I don't know if they
So
could do that.
what I mean here is like,
Are there any movies that have come out like that, saying like Klaus is Satan or something?
well, this is an interesting thing because
The UN.
like what you brought up here, like your reaction is I think what they want. They want us to say Like when Kubrick was kind of exposed as having revealed something about Apollo 11, they want us to think that we have somebody trying to wake us up, doing a little bit to nudge the masses. And that line of thinking, it seems right, but it's actually kind of nefarious and tricky because what they're doing is they're making you think so. This is the nature of controlled opposition. It's what I call the guardrail. So you're going down the mainstream freeway and you start questioning things and then you drift off and you're about to get off of it altogether and then you hit this guardrail and it keeps you going down the same line because it doesn't change the big story. It doesn't delete space and it doesn't reveal the behind the scenes collusions with all governments against the masses. It hides the global nature of the deception as well.
No, I agree. I totally agree with you. That they came up with some like supposedly legitimate reason that they lied about it, rather than just black budget stuff and taking all the money and God knows what the hell they do with it.
Yeah,
Underground structure.
underground. You know what? That's probably it. I'm actually willing to bet that would be it. If anything, it's probably deep space is code for what's underground. You know,
Dude, the years that Art Bell did his show, he did it for a really long time, and fairly frequently, random people, eyewitnesses, whatever, for whatever that's worth, and they can make it up, but they've got no reason to. They're anonymous people, and they're talking about things that they've seen. Gigantic equipment and crazy shit going on, rumblings under the ground, and all kinds of stuff. It's been going on for a long time. So
yes,
I think they've got a pretty good structure
there's
going
a
on under
rumor
there.
that there's a underground highway connecting the Air Force Base where I'm at and Los Alamos, New Mexico, like all underground, which wouldn't surprise me. But I mean, it's rumored to be decades old, and like I find that to be more plausible.
Yeah,
Where's all the money going? But it's a
it
mind
is.
control operation, and so ultimately, I believe that space is a metaphor for the minds, our mind space, and they give us the worldview, and they provide all the psyops to control our minds.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was thinking they do have ways, underground tunnels that go to the air bases and shit like that.
Yeah, like what if the world stage is literally that? You have like beneath it, you have all the props, the special effects. I mean, I don't know how Truman Show this place is. I mean, mentally it's a Truman Show, but how much of this, physically is also a stage in that sense. And that's why I find the whole flat Earth question, because it's really a question of cosmology. What do you think this place is? And if your base assumption is that it's an object in space, then most of your question is answered. But if you question the existence of space, then it becomes a question of, well, how big is this? And if a plane, how far? Is there anything below it? It raises a lot of, I think, way more interesting questions all around. So I'm very interested in the question of worldview because the worldview they give us is one that conveniently keeps us on a leash, more or less. Not just physically, because you can only go, 12,500 miles and then you're back on your way around, but mentally, because in all the science fiction, you have this world here and then other worlds that are far away, but it's always vast distances. So there's this assumed distance between us and the nearest habitable land. So it's kind of interesting how they take a lot of what would be potential land if this place were bigger and they replace it with emptiness. And then all of the sci-fi builds on this, starting with, from the very inception of science fiction and Star Trek and stuff. But it always builds on the idea of the isolated, small, finite world. And I think that's all, again, an assumption they want us to build into our general worldview. So that's why I think the question of cosmography is way more interesting than shape.
It's interesting, but it's fringe. It's like fringe, don't you think? It's a very small amount of people that even, and I think people are so overwhelmed with the way things are going right now. Things are so fast. There's so much coming at people all the time, and the lifestyles and all of that. It's something that is not going to be a big priority to consider for, I don't think, hardly anyone, really.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because like what I see is I see a void. Like for example, nobody really cares about objectivism. I don't hear a big demand for it. Atheists have made their points, but when you get down to it, they're ideologues, they're leftists, and they buy into the God constructs of the day. But my view here is that there is a void where those who would lean towards the skeptical perspective, who would choose to be objective in a world gone subjective, those who would be skeptical and who would even be atheists to the God constructs, or at least would be questioning the priesthood, there should be a place for that, and there isn't. And so I look at this void where people aren't even thinking because it's not their priority as something that once it's pointed out, there will be many, many, many minds to fill it. Like I think there's an unrecognized, untapped into market. So I use the term parallel media because when what we're doing is fully, I think, understood, I think the numbers are going to swell because there is a huge void for people who think and for people who don't want to be talked to like they're idiots. I mean, this is an intellectual revolt in a sense. If you're willing to admit that the media talks to you like you're a fourth grader or like you're a fool, a Truman in a Truman show, if they treat you like you're a buffoon and they're buffoons all the way up, if we can accept that as a starting point, well then we can all agree we should in fact revolt against it in some way.
So, so when all right, so I'm just going to say the way that the term parallel media sounds more like it would be media, a source of media where people could go instead of the mainstream media that they go to. It's a parallel, so it's completely different, but it's still an information source, but not. It doesn't seem like necessarily. It seems like a lot of what the focus is here is attacking and deconstructing the mainstream media. So, so it's
Not quite. That's
doesn't
what
seem like it's
the alternate
parallel in a way. It
the
seems kind of antagonistic in a
no,
way, is
actually
what it
no.
seems like.
The alt media is what you're describing. The mainstream media is going the same direction. Alt media attacks them. Alt media is the reaction, and alt media forms the counter narrative to
Okay.
everything. And
So,
so they're anti media. You got mainstream and the anti, the pro and the anti. When I say parallel, I mean we're separate, and we're not only are we separate, but we have a continuous timeline that tracks with them, but we're not directly interacting. I'm not trying to enter their world and get platformed.
oh,
And not only that,
okay.
but our perspective here isn't regurgitating their lies and then trying to repackage them. We're merely labeling them accurately and putting them in their proper context. And then,
Yeah.
moreover, we're challenging the very infrastructure of lies. We're exposing how they construct this place from predictive programming to the various influence operations we're always examining. So, no, what we're doing here is not the anti, not the reflexive, not alt media. We had to separate from that because those individuals who are still in that are part of the mainstream. The anti and the pro, like I said,
No, that was good.
if I'm anti-anti, that's a position we have to take.
Yeah, it's good, dude. It makes people stop and think at least for a second. No, that that your description of what you mean by parallel makes absolute sense.
If you
I
go
just
to
didn't. So.
parallelmedia.org, I have an entire manifesto posted up there.
Oh, sweet. Oh my God. Okay.
And that's because here's why is that this this skeptical approach, auto hoaxing, this thing that we're describing is so separate from the orthodoxies of Trutherville that I don't want to be mixed in with them anymore. They're a liability. They destroy the credit. And here's another issue too. Some people say, "Oh, can we just let the Mandela effect it in?" No, because there are tens of millions of them, and there's only maybe 100,000 auto hoaxers. And if you let in one group of non-objective MSM plus types who still kind of one foot in Trutherville, you will just destroy what we're doing. So we're actually quarantining at this point. Like we will not platform or allow
That's
that in.
good. That's, yeah, that's good. That works.
Not only is it good, but it's honest. Like everyone else is, look, this is a world of lies, and I'm not afraid to call people liars. And a lot of people are unwitting liars. And it's like their feelings may get hurt, but the fact of it is, if you're saying this is such and you don't know it to be true, but you feel it, you really have to question, I guess, for yourself, like if you're trying to convince people, to be afraid of microwaves, for example, you're like letting people know, hey, warn your grandparents, don't touch the microwave, it'll kill you. At some point, are you really a truther just because you're scared and you're spreading that fear? And I would argue that no, what you're doing is actually very toxic and it's what the media does. and it sows fear by design without evidence. And so, anyway, my point here is that most truthers are actually propaganda mules, and they're carrying toxic information designed to harm themselves, people around them, and it's designed to alienate them from society, which has its own mental and physical side effects. I'm not here to alienate people.
I don't know if it alienates them. It's almost like most people are like that.
Truthers are castigated, impugned, and hated on by the media 24/7. The whole MAGA movement's a big smear. The cliche is that your truther uncle at Thanksgiving is going to spread some stuff, and now it's been conflated with hate and Nazism. So there is this schism they've created where the conspiracy theorists are looked at as threats. In fact, the FBI has, and even in I think Australia, they've been making these cases more and more that conspiracy theorists are the threats. That guy who incinerated himself was a radical conspiracy theorist. So this is how they're painting it up. And so what I'm suggesting is break
Yeah.
away from that. That's a sinking ship.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't think about that. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, those individuals who are still a part of it have to relinquish the toxicity and exit the mind war, or they'll double down. And I don't care which, but I will ask them, to if they're going to make claims to stand by it, like the people who say, chemtrails or 5G towers are going to destroy us in some way. It's like I'm not just going to stand by and let these things get a pass if I'm going to question the lefties who say, this is going to kill us or that. There's always these things that are just unquestioningly accepted, and I think they need to be challenged.
Yep, I agree, 100%.
Anyway, I appreciate the call. We're just
Awesome.
kind of just killing some time tonight, just chatting. Nothing huge. I mean, the big news of the day is uh, The Apprentice season 34. Trump just got arrested. I guess he's going to jail. Seattle's going to get nuked in six
What?
days. Oh yeah, you don't know about Trump? He's being sentenced on 7/11. 34 felonies. I think there's 54 more to go. I think it's going to be 88. But yeah, he's going to jail.
Oh, they did it. They did it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of
Wow, man.
celebration on the left, and the right's mad, saying it's rigged. But yeah, Trump's going to
Oh,
jail.
I thought of something. Well, we're talking about underground shit. Um, I I think I brought this up a long time ago, and I don't know if you've ever seen A Boy and His Dog. There's a very interesting section in that movie about this underground society. It's like post-nuclear, of course, and so the above ground are like the barbarians, and underground is this freaking place called Kansas. Oh my God.
Okay, you know what? I'll take a look because we're talking about Fallout quite a lot. A boy and his dog. Okay, I'll take a look. Sounds fun.
It's an interesting movie, actually. It has a hilarious ending. It's not really it's not really graphic, but they have they imply graphic shit. But it's interesting. It's fun. The dog talks. The kid talks to his dog. They're telepathic, and the dog's smarter. It's pretty funny.
Okay, I'll take a look. I'll take a look. I mean, I actually
But
like.
the underground world is scary. It's like freaky, scary. Wow. I mean, yeah, you got to check it out.
Okay, I'll check it out. I mean, I do like a lot of dystopian stuff. I like sci-fi, and I've been recommending people watch the Humanity Bureau about humanity locked down, and Nick Cage is like working for the government, and
Mm.
and Geiger counters are forbidden, so people don't know that they're locked down for no reason. It's kind of funny. Like that was like 2017. But anyway, I'll take a look because I'm just looking in general at a lot of Fallout stuff because I think we're being conditioned and have been for some time, but I think they're preparing us for Fallout as an excuse to lock down. And I think it's become pretty evident just with the recent releases from the Nolans. But yeah, I'll add that to my list of movies to watch. I am building a list of movies to
Well,
watch and recommended movies.
that's a good idea, and that's good you see, that's the kind of information that people really need to know. So that just exactly what you're saying, Tim. If they and then when it happens, they're like, oh, there it is. Rather than, oh my God, let's go get into the basement or whatever.
Right, right, exactly. And I
All right.
I think it's
Thanks.
okay. Well, anyway, yeah, fear is the mind killer and all that. Appreciate the call and have a great night. All
You too.
awesome. That was we. Phones are still open. Boy and his dog is good, says upside down guy. Yeah, look, here's the thing I want to point out too, because I'm not just targeting truthers for no reason. The truthers are in a nightmare world, whereas the blue pillars are in a dream world. But the blue pillars believe all the crazy stuff. They believe in nukes. They think the world's going to end, but they're apathetic to it. They're really highly programmed, but I mean, it's almost like unconscionable how little they actually care and they believe it. That's a far cry from us who don't believe it and don't care. So I'm like, oh, yeah, these fake dead people don't matter. And they're like, those dead people don't matter to me. So who has the moral high ground? The auto hoaxer saying fake dead kids' lives don't matter, or the true believer who says those dead kids' lives don't matter to me, and they believe it to be real. And then the truthers are just like, oh, they were killed by a black op, and it was SSRI's mind control killer to take our guns. So they're just deeper in the fear, and they still believe in the atrocities. So I'm just saying, you have the moral high ground when you get out of their mind war games. And not only that, but you do get the peace of mind of not having to reflexively react to every fake tragedy as though it's real. Michelle Casser said it would be fun to choose a movie we all watch and then share our thoughts. Yeah, that's a really good idea. In fact, let's do a short list here. So we're starting with A Boy and His Dog. I mentioned The Village tonight. That's a must watch. In the Mouth of Madness and They Live are two John Carpenter movies that are must watches. Free Guy. A lot of these have predictive programming as well. Uh, Oppenheimer, Fallout. Don't know if these are must watches. No, I don't know. Here's one. Newsbenders. You have to watch Newsbenders. If you watch Newsbenders, The Village, and In the Mouth of Madness, you can figure out the whole world. If you just have those three. Truman Show, obviously. Truman Show also has the esoteric layers, which leads into conversations about the meaning of serious. And this is all really intriguing because I have elephant tusks saying, how much of this is dream, how much is real, etc. And the Truman Show, he lives on a movie set. So his objective reality is somehow a fraud. And he wakes up to it when the dog star falls. And that also is symbolic or significant in the symbolic systems, the dog star, and the idea of the star of initiation, or he wakes up to the fact that his world's a lie. So he's in a mental prison because he believes all the lies. But the mental prison keeps him locked in a physical prison because he doesn't know that he's on a stage. And so this is why I find the question of cosmography interesting. Because if we're given a false model that precludes the existence of vast distances of emptiness and space before the next real estate, then there's no reason to go anywhere. You're already on a leash. Yet, if you find out that the model is false and then you test it, what would you find? And in the Truman Show, he found out that he lived in a small town and there was an entire world outside, and he was basically a fool, his entire life. And he woke up by accident. It wasn't like they did him a favor. And they were controlling his world from the moon. And it was Christoph, who is the man in black in Westworld. So it's interesting to follow these characters. Jim Carrey, his connection to the dog star in all his movies. But then Ed Harris, who plays Christoph, who creates The Truman Show. And The Truman Show has other interesting connections. President Truman, the advent of the nuke. And in Newsbenders, they suggested that with the advent of the atom bomb, they brought us into the movie world. But Ed Harris shows up in Westworld as the man in black who plays this embodiment of Hades over the prisoners in the underworld, in Westworld, the synths. But the archetype that he plays is the same, the demiurge, the controller, who you have to beat him to escape the Matrix. Truman had to beat Christoph. In Snowpiercer, he's the engineer they have to beat to get the train to stop. Just this reoccurring position for this particular character. He plays Kane in Top Gun 2, who's like the obstacle to Maverick, which is also interesting. All right, yes, Multi C0 Dagger says, awesome call. Appreciate the support here. Man on the Moon with Truman. Oh, that's right, he did that. Dark City says Elephant Tusks. Okay, yeah, Dark City's a good one, which has the physical world being manipulated. Now, Dark City is referenced in They Cloned Tyrone, which is a combination of Westworld, Dark City, and I think you could probably add a few others into it, but it has this idea of like a movie set manipulated reality. A lot of Josie and the Pussycats. This movie just it's kind of an amalgamation. It has a lot of great influences, but the Dark City connection is there, and they have Keith Sutherland as just a way of kind of reinforcing it. But yeah, Snowpiercer, by the way, is a follow-up to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So Kristoff would be Charlie all grown up, which is kind of interesting when you look at the role of Elon Musk. We may get into this in Hyperloop. It's a whole other element to that particular character. Tom Winwood says Truman, Cable Guy, Programmed by TV, Man on the Moon, Fake, Real Events, Good Trilogy. Yeah, you have to look at their entire catalog as a whole because they don't just do these separate movies that are disparate and non-connected, but they're conveying certain ideas across multiple movies. And I picked this up when I was watching The Truman Show because I just read Robert Anton Wilson's book, Cosmic Trigger. So I was already aware of a lot of the symbols that were in the movie, so I saw them. And this is what it means to have the initiated interpretation, because you have the esoteric and the exoteric. The masses are exoteric. They're paying for the movie ticket, watching a movie, they just see a funny slapstick comedy. But if you've been let in, if someone has shown you the light, if you've been clued into certain symbols and their meaning, then you watch it with a different filter, a different lens. Your hoodwink has been removed. So if you have the initiated interpretation of the Truman Show, you get a whole other story. And I got that story because of what I had just read in Robert Anton Wilson's book. So then I followed this up with watching the number 23, and the number 23, it doesn't say it explicitly, but it is obviously based on the book Cosmic Trigger. And these are both about Sirius, the dog star, the star of initiation. And the character in number 23, I believe he's even a dog catcher. But the colors, the numbers, the symbols, it's just very consistent across all these various aspects of these characters. And then Jim Carrey comes out on the world stage and he's always talking about the number 33, and he comes off as some kind of an enlightened guru, which is probably not fake necessarily. He had this really interesting anecdote about how he wrote himself a check for $10 million dollars and how he carried it with him, and then one day he had one and he believed that he manifested that particular possibility. Infinite Plane Radio. Hey, what's up, caller?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for taking my call. Hey, I wanted to comment about the news benders. The first time I ever heard news benders was from a very unlikely place. I was heading back to my hometown for Christmas like 2 or 3 years ago, and I was listening to the Alex Jones show, and he played the whole entire movie. It's basically a 30-minute movie. He played the whole entire thing from start to finish, and I'm like, what? As soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh my God, no way. This is from when? And as soon as I got where we were going, I pulled it up on YouTube and watched it, and I couldn't believe it, dude. Like that was, and it really, to me, when I watched it, first of all, I couldn't believe that was on TV back then, and it was just so full of just in your face truth, and and then the fact that Alex Jones was even playing that on there, which goes against most of the stuff that he talks about. He's constantly ramping up nukes and ramping up war and all this other stuff that he plays up that's obviously not going on the way that he claims it is. And it's funny because after he played that was one of the last times I ever just really was listening to the Alex Jones show. Every now and then I'll tune in Most of the time, I listen to clips from other places,
Yeah,
but
same.
it's really interesting that he played that, and I mean that was a huge eye opener for me. And now I recommend that movie, that short movie, to pretty much everybody now. And if you go to psychotube.com, that's normally the very first video that pops up on there, which I'm glad.
Well, I
But
recommend it as like
yeah,
required
I think
watching.
Newsletters.
It's required. I mean,
Oh, dude,
Synchromorpheus did
yeah,
a breakdown.
100%.
Yeah, it's like it tells you, like it's a hypothetical, but it tells you how it would work how it could conceivably work. And it even implies that there's a small number of people in the know. But Synchromorpheus had done a deep dive onto it, and it has this part where he's talking about writing the news 5 years in advance. And there's this part where the shadow on the wall creates what looks like twin towers. So it even foreshadows 9/11, interestingly.
Really interesting.
But um, when I saw that the first time, I thought, okay, this is showing a very plausible scenario. But then later, it really occurred to me this would explain predictive programming. If you look at predictive programming as advertising, repeating an idea, a motif, a symbol again and again before you see it in the news to pre sell you on it, then this would make sense. That if you wanted to write history, you don't have to strong arm your way through every event. You just write it in advance and then you run psyops, which are pre scripted events, and then you have the final editorial control. But yeah, I do believe we live in a news bent reality and the outcomes are always controlled.
Oh yeah, 100%, dude. I mean, when I
I think oh, caller just dropped. If you want to call back, that's fine. We still have another 8 minutes here. So yeah, the caller's talking about news benders, and you can find it on FacoTube apparently, which is great. I'll see if I can get that link. And here's the thing: many people are mystified by synchronicities, coincidences, which are always bewildering. But in media, you have many instances of eerie foreshadowing of significant news events again and again. Famously with The Simpsons, but there are just too many examples right on the list. But as a rule, this has just been called predictive programming, and it's said to be coincidences or evidence of some kind of um, higher power, AI. The whole idea here is that this is not like a standard operating procedure. It's just sort of like a mystical thing. They call it synchromysticism. And I think this explanation has been a barrier to understanding just how fake news is. That some will say, well, it can't all be scripted. Well, okay, well, can you not agree, or do you not agree that every single staged news event is scripted? Like the shooting at the Crocus Theater. Well, presuming it to be a hoax, there's a script, foregone conclusions, actors, rehearsals. They do a drill, present it as real. My point of it is fake pre-scripted event on the news, and now it becomes part of official history. Now the rest of the news bounces off of that. So as long as the big dominant agenda setting stories are fake, everything else that falls under the umbrella gets a pass. But this is how they write our history in broad strokes. Like this event happened, everything reacts to it as though it were real. This is the nature of their fictional universe. They give us these guideposts. And so what I'm saying is we already have a basis for asserting that everything is scripted or everything significant rather. All the significant events are scripted. Not a questionable statement at all. Standard operating procedure. And that they write in broad strokes. 9/11 is planned before the buildings were taken down. The Trump campaign that we're seeing right now, every major facet of it, from his arrest, his arraignment, his arrest, what's happening now, all of it scripted decades ago. He's one of the most scripted characters in the world, and the space program is a story. It's a long-term space opera. It's going to play out over the decades to centuries. So my point here is we can establish how they do it as a methodology. Newsbenders exposes this. And with that understanding, now we can understand how you could include predictive programming without inserting the supernatural. We can we can just show it as a form of getting us to believe stuff in advance through repetition, conditioning, and literally programming. Elizabeth says, Tim, I'm trying to understand you. You believe some evil people are getting us ready for a fallout scenario, predictive programming and such. Other things that could be carried out by evil, you don't. Yeah, I'm saying it's all mind war. And that they need a pretext for lockdowns. They need a pretext for shifting the balance of power, for maybe regulating the internet, because mind viruses by the alt right, radicalized white nationalists, they colluded with Russia and nuked Seattle. Whatever it is. Yeah, I'm saying that the agenda of mind control is apparently, you could call it evil, or you could call this a benevolent dictatorship, which I don't think is a good thing necessarily. So what I'm saying is that yes, it is nefarious that we're a mass mind controlled population. And the argument here is that they're so bad, why wouldn't they really do stuff? And it's like, well, I don't think they need to. I think what they want is a domesticated, calm, mind controlled, compliant population who are crate trained. And 2020 proves that we are crate trainable en masse. And I'm just suggesting that they're not going to be able to pull that off again. It's too partisan, it's politicized, nobody believes it anymore. No matter how many permutations, they can't get us to believe in another lockdown situation with that particular agenda. However, when they do the fallout, well, there's bipartisan belief in nukes and fallout. There's not going to be any political disagreement. Everybody's going to lock down. I think it makes way more sense. Climate lockdowns are a thing, but those too are partisan. And they're going to combine it, obviously, but I'm suggesting that no, they don't really do anything other than terrorize us. Doesn't mean the world's safe, but I'm just saying that the worldview they give us invents things, hyperstitions, like religions always have fire and brimstone, hell, demons, goblins, whatever. This is how they control us, hyperstitions. This is an ancient technique, it's an ancient system for controlling the masses through psychodrama and the beliefs in various god constructs. I would call the atom bomb a war god, and I don't believe in it. I don't kowtow to that god. I will not duck and cover to it. But I think they also adhere to certain Machiavellian strategies. There are Linskyites, Rules for Radicals, number 9, says that the threat of the thing is more terrifying than the thing itself. And the idea here is that as long as they can scare you with hypotheticals, they don't ever actually have to produce it. And I think once in a while they have to give us a spectacle to scare us again. And I think they may have one planned. It's been a while since we've had some spectacle transfix us. Because 2020 was just a creeper. It didn't have us all staring at the same thing all at once in the same way. Something else too. Dewis and Paris says virus model is more universally permeable as a lockdown mechanism than nukes, though. Right, but here's the thing I think they would want to do. I think the agenda would be this. They'll do the nuke thing, partial blackout, everybody's upset, now we're at war. But now they have an excuse to lock down the internet and quarantine it from mind viruses. So we're going to have the 2020 equivalent of a lockdown, but it'll be like just like we had then, but it'll be on the internet. You'll have to mask your mind lest you spread some mind virus that radicalizes somebody into doing something so destructive again. And disease X, the hypothetical disease the WHO has been saying is going to be the one that takes us all down. Well, why assume it's a virus? Disease X is going to be a mind virus emanating from where? X. Elon Musk, the guy who released the Kraken. This is all by design. This is done publicly to create outrage so the public will clamor for the solution, which is again, this is again censorship. And this all ties in, interestingly, to Musk's world stage role as the new Constantine, as they're consolidating the worldview and converting your little handheld monolith into the Bible of this new world order religion, which is simply the acceptable worldview. They just have to get rid of certain ideas. Ban a few more heretics here or there. By the way, I stopped paying for Twitter. I canceled all my blue checks because they banned me from recording video streams, live streams. I started doing live video, I was drawing, painting live, and they banned me. So I moved to my other account, bought a check. They banned me. I don't know. Well, I have a feeling. It's a little paranoid, but I do think I might be targeted. But anyway, my point is, let's say they do a hypothetical just hypothetically, they pull off a nuking of Seattle or something. We'd have blackouts, we would have chaos, and then we'd have excuses for censorship. They would screw things up. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point. As far as the believability of it, I think it's crucial that they control all critics. And I think they're going to be able to really emphasize the control of the flow of information in this one if they're able to do blackouts. Okay, let's see here. 360 Pick says, I know the news is sad, but I remember when reality was happier. Interesting statement. It varies, I think. To be honest, we only have a certain amount of bandwidth. How many Fs can you give a day? And I think that the more I've detached from automatic belief and therefore reaction, and I've taken on the calm, dispassionate parsing of facts, and I respond, but I'm not reactive, I think I have achieved a degree of peace with the world. I can't control my immediate surroundings all the time, but as far as the state of the world, I don't live in the end times. That's not a presupposition I wake up with every day. And that is for mainstream believers in scientism, it is for all kinds of truther cultists, and the neo eschatology of climate change ensures that the entire political left also believes that they are in the end of days. And I'm not there. So you could say that we're the vanguard of something of a neo enlightenment insofar as we've stepped outside of the cave and the alternative cave. Okay, Upside Down Guy says, did you verify your ID on Twitter? I think they stopped all unverified channels. Oh, I gotta show my license. That's nice. I don't know if I trust them that much. This is true, not paranoia. After we exposed Mousegate and went kind of viral, it was going viral, Starlink's chief of security started following me on Twitter. And it stood out because he was only following Elon Musk and me. I'm like, that's weird. So I messaged him and I said, tell Elon the IPS knows. Just trolling. And ever since then, I've been banned on everything. Tomino says, if it's the end of days, give me all your stuff. Yeah, look, if you believe in climate change and you have beachfront property, you should be concerned about the ocean levels. So let's swap houses. If you believe the world's ending, like on September the 23rd, let me have your car. And introduce me to some of your friends. You won't need them after you're raptured. Like, I think a lot of you who are preparing to leave the world because you know the world's going to end, you should, walk the talk. That's what I expect. Like, I'll debate anything with anybody, but you have to bring your own evidence. Too many people are too quick to, just basically cheat. And it is cheating. You can't reference someone else's clip on YouTube. Otherwise, why would you make the claim? Okay, we're going to continue this tomorrow. I realize I have not sent out live stream notifications in the last couple of days. No, I'm sorry, I have, but I haven't sent out the archives. So I will do that very soon. A couple notes here I said. The flat earth in 2024, bottom line. The discussion should be inner world concept versus outer world in actuality. Is our belief about it accurate, and if not, why not? This should lead to an examination and possible challenge of the media itself. This is why I always talk about the ubiquitous monolithic presence of media. The flat earth question is not about science, but perception and how much faith we place in media. The glurfs who dominate the pro-globe side of the debates, they believe everything on the news. So they're reality impaired. Why would you even debate them? They want you to debate them about science, but what I'm saying is this is not about science. This is actually about perception and how it's filtered. Outside the purview of flat versus round, which never goes anywhere and never will, by design. Candace Owen says, the older I get, the more absurd the concept of dinosaurs roam the earth until a big meteor hit comes to me. There's at least one journalist lurking who wants to write up the headline, Candace Owens Dinosaur Denier. Oh, Dino Cost Denier. So here's the thing. Candace Owen, Stu Peters, and many other these alt-right types will occasionally glom onto good memes. They'll step into our turf and they'll say things that make sense from our perspective. And they mix it in with their calls to murder Democrats and tie nooses and run around with big Trump flags. So they just take our concepts that are valid or questions that are valid and they tamper with it by essentially polluting it because these are people with millions and millions of viewers. This is why I said you can't let the Mandela effect it onto the raft, or you can't let the chemtrail believers onto the raft because we skeptics are outnumbered by both of those demographics, and you don't want to be drowned out. And this is why we had to leave Trutherville because we don't want to be represented by these caricatures, these actors who are essentially parodies of extremists, pose. Okay, let's see what else here. Michelle Castor says you poked the Elon bear. Agreed. Elephant Tusk says I'll hit you up on there. We can finish this discussion. Yeah, we'll take phone calls. In fact, tomorrow should be interesting. Right now, as we speak, the rocket, the delayed Boeing Starliner, is orbiting the Earth, and then tomorrow it's going to go into the space station. So our question has been, with all the twin symbolism and the Boeing disasters in the last year, are we going to see some kind of a disaster with this launch that has been delayed? And so we'll see. Tomorrow is also 666, I guess, if you add 2, 4, and add and don't look at the first two, apparently. I mean, you can play games like this if you're a gematria calculator expert. But anyway, Ryan Garcia, who claims that he was abused at Bohemian Grove by, was it Andrew Tate? I don't remember exactly, but he basically said that he was a victim, and he later admitted that he was trolling to get a lot of people to watch his fight, which worked. He made millions and millions of dollars. However, he has also been saying for some time that there's going to be a nuke, an earthquake in Los Angeles on June 6th, which will be tomorrow. So, see here, Ryan Garcia says the big earthquake will hit Los Angeles. Ryan Garcia's ominous prediction: earthquake will strike LA and destroy Hollywood and Vegas, aka Sin City. Ryan Garcia goes viral for predicting something. He said the Holy Spirit speaks through him. So again, if you're in Los Angeles tomorrow, there's an earthquake. And if you're in Seattle on the 11th, which is going to be on a Tuesday, you're going to get nuked. Now, this isn't a guarantee, but these are just a couple of guesses. And look, Ryan Garcia is nowhere near as reputable a source, and his basis for making these claims are nothing close to what JL or what we talk about here. Just saying. Anyway, we will be back tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for the comments, calls, as usual. This is Chief Crow and the Flat Earth Worms. We'll be back likely earlier. I'm going to turn this back on over to the 24/7 stream on the backup YouTube channel.
I'm on auto hopes and it feels so